Hello. So this seems a really good time to chat about content and to make some content chatting about content because it is a really important topic and obviously one that I've been thinking about quite a lot over the last couple of weeks. And this, I think, applies not only to random digital marketers who are creating that content, but also it's advice I've generally used with a lot of B2B clients looking to scale through organic content, for example. Um, and this is one that I'm looking to share very honestly, a lot of the learnings that I've made so far and over quite a number of years of putting out content, either through agencies or personally releasing content. Obviously, this is a perfect example of that. And the podcast that I started up last week that kind of reapplies this and that you might be listening to this on. Um, and I think it's really important because it's a really I've never seen it in any other industry that marketing is obviously one where marketers very much know about the power of promotion, and therefore are very interested in the concept of content and how do we promote the work that we are doing, for example. So I've seen a lot of examples out there throughout the industry, and it means that there's one that you can fall into a very large number of traps when you are thinking about the content that you are putting together. One of those traps in particular has been, I think, trying to make content too mass market. And particularly if you are in B2B or if you are in marketing yourself, it's one that you kind of always have to be mindful of the balance between the quality of the stuff that you're putting out and the wideness of the market that you are going to hit. Generally, the more advanced stuff you create, there's kind of no way to avoid this. The more advanced and the more niche stuff that you create, the smaller the market that that is going to have. So you can't, for example, and what this means is that you can't necessarily judge the performance of your content based on, for example, the number of page visitors that it got or the organic visibility of those terms. And this is something I found in the past when, for example, producing content that is very SEO optimized and has been very successfully SEO optimized. There are still a few keywords related to the industry that are out there that lead to posts by me, like released under a few different blogs, and that's been helped by, I mean, pretty much driven exclusively by the domain authority that those blogs have been posted on. But I like to think I had a very small part in that. But the main thing that I found with all of that content is that in order to make it highly visible and get a lot of impressions and site visitors through that particular content, you have to dumb it down. And things like listicles, for example, obviously do really, really well for getting that volume, but it's something that you have to reduce everything that you do to, 5 ways to improve your PPC keywords, really targeting at terms like improve your PPC keywords, which isn't necessarily going to be that useful for me. I don't necessarily want to hit that particular audience. So in that sense, going after a mass market, unless you really truly want to capture that mass market and go after everyone in the industry searching for those terms, don't target that as your main target. On the other hand, if you are looking to create mass, like good advanced content that people actually find useful, generally don't expect it to go viral. That's not the metric that you should be looking to measure it with. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about what metrics I do use to measure the impact of content. So another one that kind of goes within this, and I do think that optimizing your distribution is really important to one extent. So this is where the kind of my switch to releasing the podcast has actually been the kind of completion of a move away from blogging. And that is what I basically started posting on. It's something that I still love and still would love to do more of it on. And I love writing, for example, but essentially I found that video was a much better way of distributing the same content, but getting it much more widely reaching and actually getting it to be digested by the audience that I want to hit. So chatting a little bit about blogging versus videos and what I found the differences are between the two of them. So blogging, I basically found very few people ultimately read it. And what I focused on with those blogs was very much the kind of more advanced stuff. I didn't care about SEO for the reason that I said above. That wasn't what I was really going for, because I knew I'd then have to dumb stuff down. But basically, I found that, and I found this repeatedly with blogs in the past, is that obviously the more niche that you make them, the fewer people read them. Whereas I found that the same content put in video, for example, people watched it, and I was getting much more, and I measured that through duration of views, for example. But I generally found that a lot more people were actually digesting the same quality of content. Now, I do think that there is a massive place for writing in blogs. And I think there is still a massive place for blog content. It's one that blogging and writing written posts about deeply advanced topics means that you have the opportunity to actually, research them properly, to consider them properly. I'm not held to account by words that I say, or hopefully I'm not held to account by words that I say on the spur of the moment in a video, for example, to the same standard that I would be if I was writing them down in a blog, which showed that I had to have considered that sentence and revised it and got it in a place that I was really happy with. I can kind of have throwaway sentences in this case that I can't in a blog post. But blog posts also mean that you can produce truly well-researched content and truly well-considered and truly well-executed content that should be really useful. But if it's advanced, you shouldn't look to rely on, just organic visitors to that traffic. I've always found that with that kind of blog content, you have to have a distribution channel for it that is not SEO, or it is outside of kind of social media, for example. You have to have a direct mailing list. You have to piggyback off, for example, someone else's mailing list. It could be something that, and this is another form of content that's really important to all B2B practitioners and the industry in general. If you have a truly well-researched piece, turn it into a talk, and you can always push people to the white paper that you have, for example, and make that a call to action of your talk. Whatever way it is, you have to have a distribution channel for that content if it is truly well produced, to make it impactful. And as I said, I would love to get back into that. I still will be writing a lot, particularly for the Headlight blog. And that, I think, is a good example. I'd be biased, but it's a really good example of pieces that time has gone into creating these, researching these, and putting them together in a way that makes them really, really useful. So to that extent, I am sad to be moving away from that written content a little bit and moving into video also, because video is eminently, it makes me feel deeply shameful. And it's something that, sorry, not shameful, self-aware and self-conscious is probably the better word. And likewise with podcasting, why does the world need another white male podcaster, for example? It makes me very self-aware and awkward. I feel that right now. So for all of those reasons, blogging, and I'm inherently drawn to it and would love to get back to it. But ultimately, in going to this video, I followed a lot of the signals that have come about. And you may have noticed through all of the videos that I've put out in the past, I've been playing around a lot with duration, with the specs on it, vertical versus horizontal. I've been playing around a lot with the themes of those videos. And I have kept track of all of the results from all of those previous videos. And I decided very early on when looking at that what metrics I wanted to maximize and which ones I didn't care about. And the ones that I don't care about at all were stuff like likes, engagements, everything like that. Impressions to a great extent were things that I don't really care about because they're not really meaningful indicators of impact. I think likes and engagement are to one extent useful because that's what pushes the video more and more on LinkedIn. Although I found often that my videos that have been the most liked haven't had the most impressions, which is interesting. But to one extent, they're useful for pushing that a little bit more. But it's not a good feedback signal of the quality of the video, for example. People are very sparing with likes on LinkedIn or any form of reaction. And that's because on LinkedIn, because everyone is aware that if you like a bit of content, then it pushes that content to your network and promotes it to your network. A like is not a sign of like approval or a sign of quality of a post. It's more a visible broadcasting of approval. You're only going to stick a like really next to something that you are very happy with being associated with and kind of lending your credibility towards. And it's a very visible platforming of certain content, which people are understandably very, very hesitant to do on a platform like LinkedIn. So that's one that, for all of those reasons, I basically don't care at all. And what I found really useful on video, for example, and what really led me to kind of lean into that was essentially the duration of views and what I want to see across both written content and the video view content is basically a sign that people have actively digested that content. They've taken it and they've looked into it. And I basically want to maximize the amount that people have digested that content. Because ultimately that's what, is a sign that the content is good. And a sign that people are finding it useful and a sign that that content is doing, what I want it to do, which is be useful, be practical, and be helpful. So those are the metrics that I look at. And when I compared blog with video, for example, that was the kind of quantitative signals that the amount of time that people were spending looking at those videos was much, much higher than the number of, people that were visiting the blog pages, but also the time that they were spending in actually digesting that. So and I think this kind of speaks to, and everyone's form of content is going to look different. What works for me is not going to work for anyone else. But if there's one thing, and I hope some of those insights do help anyone who is thinking about putting more out there, for example, but that's the kind of top tip I would say to take away is figure out what metrics are actually important to you, what are actually meaningful. Don't get dragged away by vanity metrics. We've seen it before with any number of channels. Clients, you would never recommend going after a pure impressions driven campaign, for example. So what I'd recommend is pick those metrics that are meaningful, that actually indicate quality and impact of that content, and maximize that. And actually, I would say one part of this might be written content, for example. If you have a really good distribution channel that you can share, if you have a platform to run through, for example, speeches at conferences, then that might prove out to be a really, really strong channel for you. But obviously, it also depends, can you handle the self-consciousness and the self-loathing that comes with, for example, recording a video like this. And each of that is down to different people. So I hope that has been useful. I'll wrap up there. I thought it was a timely time to speak about it. But also it's something that I put a lot of thought and consideration into and tried a large number of times in a variety of different places. And therefore hopefully picked up a thing or two along the way. So the key things being pick a metric and go for it. Choose a channel that works for you. And broadly, be very wary of content that on the face of it looks good and generates a lot of buzz, for example, or gets a lot of page visits, be very wary of that balance between buzz and actually putting out stuff that has an impact, that is meaningful and is actually useful to people. That's the only kind of, I could never, never, ever go too far down that viral line because I don't want to be famous, for example. But what I can stomach and what I can tolerate is putting out stuff that is helpful, hopefully, to people. And that's the line that I've settled on. So hope some of those are useful and that you can take them away.